I think one of the things that maybe you don't have this problem, Roderick, you seem very charming, but one of the worries that my wife and I had when we were moving from Chicago to Tulsa was, will we be able to make any friends?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to make friends as an adult.
Known as the biggest town you'll ever experience. With its unique historical background, Tulsa is home to a diverse range of people and businesses with a thriving economy. Delicious eats, nightlife, and entertainment for all ages. Tulsa is also home to business titans, entrepreneurs, artists, and foodies. Whether you're considering a move to Tulsa or just wanting to learn more about the place you call home, the Tulsa is Home podcast is for you.
Welcome to another episode of the Tulsa is Home podcast. Today we get to talk about one of Tulsa's nonprofit groups, the OP Project. And so we're here with Lauren Sivak, and appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll get to dive into what the mission is and where you guys focus and all the benefits that come through it for the students of Tulsa and Oklahoma. And so first, where are you from? And tell us just a little bit of background.
Absolutely. I am originally from Indiana, small town in northwest Indiana, but before moving to Tulsa in July 2022, I lived the last 13 years in Chicago. And I was running a nonprofit. I had moved to Chicago to pursue theater, which is actually how I met my wife, who is originally from Tulsa. And I was really invested in education initiatives in my neighborhood in Chicago, with an emphasis that, you know, every young person should have access to high quality education regardless of their zip code. And when I moved here, I worked remote a little bit, so there was a transition period where I was still running the nonprofit in Chicago that was a story-based collective. But I knew that I wanted to find a way to be part of the education ecosystem in the city. So my background is in nonprofit management, but I have a degree in English education, and I spent a lot of time working in education-based advocacy efforts.
Okay, awesome. And then, how long have you been in Tulsa?
2.5 years.
Okay.
But the first time my wife brought me to Tulsa was in 2017.
Okay.
And it was awesome. Yeah. I immediately had a crush on Tulsa. I often say
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, sometimes I'll say first I fell in love with a Tulsan, then I fell in love with Tulsa.
Yeah.
Her family, I think, they saw an opportunity in me to be like, oh, well, maybe we can woo Lauren.
Yeah.
And Lauren will bring Aaron back, and it worked. It was the greatest hits tour. And on the way back, we were driving back to Chicago, and I said to Aaron, we should move to Tulsa.
Yeah.
And at that point, she said absolutely not, because she was an actor, and Chicago is a really thriving theater scene. Certainly, definitely before the pandemic, it did. Things have changed as we all navigate a post-pandemic normal. But you know, pandemic also changes everything. Yeah. And so we went from, really loving our 2-bed, 1-bath condo to thinking, we can have something different, right? We can have a little more space, a little less gray, and it's been wonderful. There are a few things in my marriage that I get to be the 100% right about. Tulsa is the 100% right.
So is it, you mentioned the people, did it feel, your first impression, did it feel like just a really small town coming from Chicago, or did it feel balanced? You know, Tulsa, a lot of people say it's got everything. It's got the, it's got the restaurants, it's got the nightlife, it has the kids events and everything. But coming from specifically the third largest, which I just found out, 'cause I didn't realize Chicago was the third largest city. Yeah. But coming from that, how did it feel? First impression.
I think.
Doesn't have to be positive. 100%.
But the thing is, I'm going to say what everybody says.
Yeah.
And what you just said, when I first came to Tulsa, the thing that really stuck out to me was that I could say yes to all of the things that I love about living in a big city, while saying no or goodbye to all of the things that I really struggle with in living in a big city, like traffic and parking. And I think one of the biggest surprises for us is how expansive our life is in Tulsa.
Yeah.
City of 400,000. I think we hit 1 million when we do all of the, what in Chicago they would call it collar cities, like the cities all, serving the collar of Chicago. I remember when we started telling our friends in Chicago that we were going to move to Tulsa, there was an immediate like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, does Tulsa even have good pho? Like, really weird questions. Because
you have to learn to ride a horse.
Yeah, I know. They're like, where's your cowboy hat? Do you have a boot? And I'm like, no. And it also very evident, and my wife told me that this would happen because she experienced this when she went from Tulsa to the University of Arkansas before she came to Chicago. She said, people don't really know where Oklahoma is on a map.
Yeah.
Like, where's Tulsa? Where are you? So when you tell people you're moving to a place that they don't know, there's a lot of questioning, not always based in curiosity. Sometimes it's based in judgment because you're choosing something smaller.
Yeah.
We were in the theater community. So when any of our friends said, oh, I'm moving to LA or New York, nobody really questioned it.
Yeah.
Right? I would, because financially doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, or space, if you want space, well, I wouldn't choose New York, but like, I know why people chose it. And it's a, yes, support your decision. I'm really happy for you. That's less so when you choose something smaller.
Interesting.
And I think part of it is, folks don't understand like why bigger is better, right? And for us, actually smaller is more expansive because when I have a friend ask me, hey, you want to grab a drink on Friday? Easy. It's an easy yes here. Not only because of the cost, right? But in Chicago, if I had a friend ask me to grab a drink on a Friday afternoon, I would immediately ask, okay, what neighborhood are we meeting in?
Yeah.
Am I driving?
All the logistics.
All of the mental math and logistics that I would figure out if I drive, okay, what time am I leaving? Because it's going to take, if we're meeting at 5:30, no, we're going to have to push it back to 6 because I'm going to have to account for traffic. How quickly am I going to be able to find parking? When I come home, will I be able to find parking in my neighborhood? Right? Okay, well, maybe I'll take public transportation. Is this going to still be running? Okay, well, I'm going to need to be leaving at this time. I think the two things that I had to, like the two habits I had to break moving to Tulsa was you don't have to actually park at the first available spot that you see.
Yeah.
The first time my wife and I came out to dinner at Cherry Street, I parked at Utica.
You had to walk a quarter mile.
I parked at Utica and 15th because we were going down to Mi Casina or something. And Aaron was like, you don't have to. I was like, no, I found a spot. And then we just walked, and there's parking right.
You passed 4 or 5 or 10 spots on the way.
And I didn't have to plan for 20 minutes in delays. I was every time we would meet somebody, I would get there 20 minutes early because I was so trained to account for traffic or an accident.
There's something good that came,
you're
20 minutes early for everything.
Always, I'm never late. My wife, on the other hand, just kidding.
That's funny.
But it's just there's not been. It's been a gift, and I think there's not a single thing of joy that I found in Chicago I didn't sacrifice in moving to Tulsa.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So when this podcast airs, I think we would have had released the Tulsa Remote Program podcast. Oh. So this is a good pub for if you're looking to work remote, move to Tulsa, you get an extra 10 grand and here's some good. This is a great segment on why Tulsa.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'm also a Tulsa remoter.
Yeah. Oh, you are?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, and so is my wife. So we got really lucky.
There we go.
In our household. We were able to leverage our, we each received $10,000 and we immediately put it as a down payment on a house.
Awesome.
I frequently, it is easy for me to talk about how much I love Tulsa. And also the Tulsa Remote Program is just it's really cool.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that maybe you don't have this problem, Roderick, you seem very charming, but one of the worries that my wife and I had when we were moving from Chicago to Tulsa was, will we be able to make any friends?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to make friends as an adult.
Yeah.
And we don't have children, so we knew that we didn't have that baked in, picking up kids from school and meeting other parents. And so what's wonderful about Tulsa Remote is they intentionally create a lot of spaces for you to interact with other people and find out where did you move here from? Oh, what brought you to Tulsa? What do you do? And you can really quickly find your people.
Yeah.
I've met these two other couples who it's hard for me. We had dinner on Friday night together, and we were talking about like an infamous Oscar moment from a couple of years ago. And one of our friends, Cynthia, said, "Wait, I didn't know you then," because it's hard for us to remember
Yeah.
like this group of friends.
Yeah.
And even though like one of them moved into Tulsa during the pandemic, or in like 2020, they were like one of the first 100 people.
Yeah.
So they've all been here, and it's just like a pre-Tulsa doesn't. We know that it exists, and we know that there was a time in our lives where we didn't know each other. But there's something that Tulsa Remote is doing that's really special, and like, the people they are bringing to this community who, in addition to having a really positive economic impact, I think that you probably know the stat is every dollar they've spent, it yields like $13 in revenue for the city. But you know, my wife and one of our dear friends are pursuing board membership at the Oxley Nature Center. Once a month, my wife and I volunteer at the food bank. They're charitable, giving people that they are bringing to Tulsa, without the goal of, I think everybody was like, oh, if you bring all of these people, housing market's going to go up.
Yeah.
It's like, well, actually, we can have a really positive economic and community impact with folks who just want to be part of a community in a way that sometimes in these bigger cities, it's really easy to feel really small.
Yeah.
And I think in Tulsa, there's just a real opportunity to make an
There are lots
impact.
of opportunities, to
That's
grow.
great.
Cool.
Highly recommend Tulsa and Tulsa Remote.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the Op Project.
Great.
Tell it, when it started, what the vision and mission is for it, and what you guys focus on.
Yeah. Well, we were founded in 2017, so before I got here. But the goal then and the goal now continues to be young people should have access to high quality after school programs. And so we were started with funding from the Wallace Foundation, and we were serving 7 school sites in North Tulsa. When the pandemic happened, our work had to adjust, and we had to adapt to serve a new education landscape.
Yeah.
And so I often talk about our work right now as like 3 chapters. We have our origin chapter, which was pre-pandemic. We have the pandemic years of like 20 to 22, which I'm hesitant to say like we're navigating a new normal, right?
Yeah.
People are still
For sure.
like getting COVID, dying from COVID. Like I'm not saying that like, oh, and that's good. That's done now.
Yeah, there's definitely a marker.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, now we're navigating this new normal, but we went from 7 school sites to 63 school sites. And we were able to leverage our partnership with Tulsa Public Schools and COVID-19 relief funding to reach thousands of students, and partner with 30 youth-serving organizations over a 3-year period. And so COVID-19 funding made possible a lot of investment in expanded learning. And when I say expanded learning, that's before school, after school, and summer school programs. And now, as we're navigating our new normal for the OP, our vision for Tulsa is a city where every young person has access to and participates in expanded learning programs. And so we do that by serving as an intermediary and working within and at the center of this education ecosystem with, we're in communication with district leaders. What are your goals? Like, how can expanded learning programming support in-school goals related to literacy and chronic absenteeism? We track a lot of data, and so that we are really figuring out which program partners are having the biggest impact on chronic absenteeism. Oh, it looks like Youth at Heart's program, they have a 92% average daily attendance for the kids enrolled in their program. That's great data when we are thinking about how do we get kids to school. I know many kids that I grew up with, they attended school for after school programming, whether it was a club, or theater or sports, like that was the reason why they came. And so now that COVID-19 relief funding is gone, right? It ended in October 2024. We are really trying to figure out how do we make the best case for why investing in out of school time programming is not just important for a thriving school district or districts, because we have multiple school districts that touch Tulsa, but it's also part of the vitality of Tulsa.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense with, just giving something to to have the kids do.
Yes.
I mean, that's really like keeping them busy, keeping them interested, engaging them. So not only just preventing them from being bored and getting into trouble,
right,
but also helping really develop them in the areas that they want to.
Yeah.
And so that's really awesome. And I learned preschool programming is a thing. I didn't really think about that. I always think of after school.
Absolutely.
So what does that look like before school?
Yep. So we have a program called Tulsa Enriched where we fund teachers to lead expanded learning programs. And I also had not really thought about that before school time. Because we do have many schools that start at 7:30, and so it's hard to make the case for a 6:30 to 7:30 program.
Yeah.
I think it would be impossible for me to find leaders who would want to work with third or fourth graders at 6:30 to 7:30, right? But it was in a conversation with our partners at Union Public Schools where they shared, one of the challenges we have is our sixth graders. They have the 6th and 7th grade center, which is Oklahoma's largest middle school. Their 6th graders don't start the school day till 9, but their 7th graders start the school day at 7:30.
Okay.
And so they have a gap.
Yeah.
So imagine if you are like me and you have a younger sibling. And I go to school at 7:30, but my younger sister Amy doesn't have school start till 9.
Yeah.
There's a problem. And that's an obstacle not only for just general coordinating schedules, but also for working families. And so in partnership with Union, we are supporting, I think, 15 before school clubs that are led by teachers this semester. And so through Tulsa Enrich, we're actually funding 146 clubs across 43 school sites.
Wow.
We funded 115 clubs last semester across 36 school sites. So there's no deficit of teachers who want to lead, but there's a little opportunity for us to think, how can we be strategic in the limited funds that we have? And so one of those is thinking about the before school programming. And so at the 6th and 7th grade center, we're funding clubs from 7:30 to 9 for 6th grade, and then from 2:30 to 4 for 7th grade.
Okay. And you mentioned the teachers leading. What percentage is teacher led versus not?
Oh,
it's 100%
virtually
teacher-led?
100%. We have
some are on site and some are off though, right?
It depends on the program,
okay,
right? So we have some of our partner organizations who we support through data, professional development, continuous quality improvement. So a partner organization like the Common Good, they have their own offsite programming.
Okay.
Or the Zone Academy and Touch Tulsa, they have their own offsite programming. But a lot of expanded learning programming does take place at the school sites. And so for our Tulsa Enrich program, all of that is currently taking place on-site at our schools.
Cool.
Yeah.
And do they have, are there academic requirements to be in? So do they have to meet a certain standard? Or what does that look like?
For us, we try to really think about the value add of expanded learning and not leverage it as something that might be punitive.
Yeah.
So if a young person is underperforming in math, restricting them access to expanded learning, we're like, I don't know that that's actually going to serve the goal, right? But there is an opportunity for us to think about if a young person is performing low in math or reading, right? There was the research of the last couple of years is not good for literacy.
Yeah.
And that's not unique to Tulsa. And it's not unique to Oklahoma. The academic loss during the pandemic is something that we're going to continue to investigate and research and figure out how do we meet the gap that currently exists. And so what we would advocate for is, what are the barriers for a young person to attend school? Because if a young person isn't attending school, they're not going to be learning at school. And so we know that it's compounded by lack of expanded learning programs, but also challenges in transportation. One of the things that Monroe Nichols talked about on the campaign trail was, and I know this is it all goes together, but we have stray dog populations. And so if you're thinking about an elementary student whose school day starts at 7:30 and it's dark in the morning and you live in a community where there are stray dogs, that's going to be a barrier to participation. And so before we create any more barriers, if it's a low performance in academic, our advocacy is how do we remove the existing ones to participation?
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into it.
Yes.
I mean, it's more than just, let's set up a program.
Right.
Like there's so many different, the logistics of it, and also, I see a big need out there for just providing opportunities for people who don't have a whole lot of opportunities.
Yes.
So how much is geared towards educational skill versus just like an entertainment, let's just keep them off the street type of effort?
Well, I'm glad that you're talking. One of the things that we often talk about is like an investment in expanded learning is an investment in Tulsa.
Yeah.
Or it's an investment in Chicago or in LA or wherever you are.
Yeah.
And that's because it's not only supporting education opportunities, but it's also supporting like economic and community-based ones. Why is it important to keep kids busy after school? Well, in Oklahoma, juvenile crime peaks between the hours of 2 and 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Right? When I was visiting a school last school year, a student said to me, if I wasn't here, I'd probably be home alone. And so a lot of our program, we don't fund tutoring clubs. Not that we don't see the value in tutoring. There's actually a lot of state funding and extra funding elsewhere for tutoring clubs. We think about enrichment clubs that can also meet academic goals. And so it might be at some schools we're funding a handful of book clubs where the teacher or club leader is intentionally trying to find books with protagonists who feel familiar to the students they are trying to reach. Yeah. And that's an opportunity for us to improve student literacy, right? But it's not, it's intentionally not a tutoring or just academic focus.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we think we can feed two birds with one seed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
I'm trying to use less violent language in 2025. Why are we killing birds, right? We don't need to kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We're just trying to feed as many birds as I can with the few, and that's every nonprofit.
Yeah.
Right? We have few seeds. And I think that's the other thing that I think is unique about the op. So one of our initiatives is data. And we want to know where programming is taking place in Tulsa in real time. And so the opportunity there is we tracked 5,521 youth from this past semester with the help of 33 other partner organizations. Okay. And so we populate a map, and it's based on TPS school district right now and the city council district, so we can say, where is programming taking place and where is programming not taking place? And so while we're investing in some communities, how can we ensure that we're not creating deficits in others? And that is another opportunity, like why having an intermediary like the op is really important.
Yeah. So you mentioned also like attendance rates and funding maybe more projects that have a higher attendance rate. How far into the weeds do you get with finding those obstacles that, like you mentioned, of, well, maybe if we just identify an obstacle and remove it, this attendance rate will go up. And then how much of that is done?
It's very easy when working with data and social scientists, which I am not. My background is in humanities, English and theater, and then a master's in nonprofit work. Data scientists and social scientists will be the first to admit that they can get into the weeds, and they can. It's kind of like a hound on a scent, right? Like, and they will be in pursuit of the why. And okay, well, I think this, and like, let me continue to verify. And sometimes I'm like, just what does the data tell me right now? And what the data tells me right now is that in school year 23-24, so last school year, kids engaged in expanded learning programming, so after school and summer programming, attended 2 to 3 more days than their peers not engaged. Now, 2 to 3 days is not going to fix chronic absenteeism, but that's really helpful. And the other data that we found is that in schools where we saw at least 5 programs and an expanded learning coordinator or liaison, like somebody who's organizing everything across the school community, an even more positive impact on chronic absenteeism in attendance. We are trying to work with a couple of our local data partners like 9B to figure out what is the next layer so that we can start to identify the impact on literacy and then maybe the future impacts on STEM related curiosities.
Yeah, for sure. How much of your funding comes from big organizations, maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe private giving, just from individuals or foundations, and then corporations like big corporations or like Oklahoma City Thunder or like different things like that, and then government grants or anything like that.
Our funding model has evolved, and what is the portfolio now looks a lot different than it did during the pandemic because COVID-19 relief funding is all government funding, and government funding moved really fast during the pandemic, and so there are many organizations, and this is not unique to the op, that are now navigating a loss. Our budget went from $3.5 to $1.2 million, and that $2 million was government funding. That was ESSER dollars, which was focused on expanded learning, and went to our partners at Tulsa Public Schools, and then we administered it on behalf of TPS. Now, most of our funding is private. It's foundation support, some individual giving, and now we are starting to cultivate new corporate partners. Oklahoma Natural Gas is funding some programs through their OERB education program. Fossils to Fuel at a handful of school sites. But there's always an opportunity for corporations to give more, if any are listening.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I tee it up.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there are a few ways we can, for us, with Tulsa Enriched, it costs us about $200 per student to provide that young person with 84 hours of after-school programming.
Okay. And so how many hours over a month?
Yeah, it 90 minutes a week, so let's say 6 hours a month.
Okay.
But we're looking at it from a semester, so 12 weeks in the fall, 16 weeks in the spring. And it's a really great ROI because where can you have children.
Yeah.
$200 divided by 84 hours, I'm suspecting is not an hourly rate that you have access to.
No.
Right? And so when we were thinking about we want young people to feel safe, we want them to have dynamic programs that they have access to while being able to support working families who are not able to pick up their children at 2:30, 3:30, or 4:30. Like, this is a natural opportunity, and the more that we invest in expanded learning, which provides free and low cost after school, before school, and summer programming, that means that working families can spend more funds elsewhere. And so there's a recent study that it's not as big as the Tulsa Remote 1 to 13, but for every $1 you spend on expanded learning, it yields $3 in revenue for a city. And so the Tulsa only grows when it invests in expanded learning.
Awesome. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you feel like we need to address or you'd like to highlight? I don't have children, and I think it's easy for folks who don't have children to sometimes think, I don't really need to worry about what's happening in the school system, or I don't really need to worry about what's happening, like whether or not a young person has access to an after-school program, it doesn't really affect me. And I think, and this is one of the conversations that I have with a lot of my friends, like, actually it does. Having a thriving school system is really critical to Tulsa's vitality. And for Tulsa to become the city that it is continually growing and pursuing, we have to be anchored by an education system that supports young people before school, during school, and after school. And so I think for those folks who don't have a student in school, to be thinking about what are the ways that this actually benefits me. And I had somebody once say, it keeps kids out of Sephora after school, right? And I'll take it. But it just helps create the next generation of Tulsans who are supported by opportunities that are rooted in positive youth development, and help create well-rounded citizens for all of us. Yeah. Awesome. And then going off of the theme, Tulsa is home.
Yeah.
I know you've been here for what, 2.5 years?
2.5 years. Yep.
And so and we touched on it at the beginning, but just to kind of recap in summary, what you touched on, why is Tulsa home to you?
Tulsa's home. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it succinctly.
Yeah.
For me, I've never felt more fulfilled by a place than I have in Tulsa.
Awesome.
And I just think this is a city that continues to refill your cup over and over again.
Awesome. That was very well put.
Oh, great. Yeah. I'm glad.
Well, we're going to do a lightning round
Oh.
with some questions
Okay.
that you haven't seen. But
have.
it's about Tulsa.
All right.
But this basically concludes the actual interview portion. So, but appreciate you for watching. And to learn more, we're going to have links and everything on the show notes and send those out and share it on the Tulsa Daily and all that. But
Awesome.
appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Absolutely.